Following the devastating war of the 1860s, visionary businessmen began to build a new South on the ruins of the old. We have often lifted up the stories of the great textile men who built an empire of looms and led the transition from an agricultural society to a time when cotton reigned as king. The lives of Captain John Milton Odell, J.W. Cannon, and his son Charles A. Cannon are case studies in the capitalistic spirit at its best. Today, however, we honor the life and achievements of Ruth Louise Coltrane Cannon, who was married to textile baron Charles A. Cannon for half a century. A charming lady, she was herself a case study in her determined commitment to the preservation of the rich heritage of her beloved community and state. Her influence in cultural matters was felt all across this state, and telling her story required that we travel from the mountains of North Carolina all the way down to its seashore. I'm Clarence Horton. On behalf of Cabarrus County and the organizations that work to preserve her heritage and history, welcome to another installment in our history of Old Cabarrus County and her people. Ruth Coltrane was one of 4 daughters born to Kentucky belle Miriam Smith Winslow Coltrane and Daniel Branson Coltrane. D.B. Coltrane was a veteran of the Civil War who rode with the legendary Jeb Stuart and was wounded in battle. Older siblings, L.D. Coltrane and Mary Juanita Coltrane, were born to D.B. Coltrane and his first wife, Eleanor Jane Van Ice, who died in Missouri. From their mother Miriam, the girls inherited Southern grace and charm, a love of family tradition and history, as well as a strong commitment to the Methodist Church, a love of beautiful things, and a strongly independent intellect. Their father, a successful businessman and banker, was born in Randolph County, North Carolina, but prospered in Missouri after war's end, before returning to North Carolina to open Concord's first bank in the 1880s. He was devoted to education and to the Methodist Church, serving in local and statewide offices. Daniel Coltrane was a tireless worker, both in his business interest and his many civic endeavors, and was often quoted as saying, "It is not enough simply to live to be a good example. You must live to be an inspiration." His daughter Ruth's life models one lived to inspire others. After her death, Walter C. Odell, a past president of the Kannapolis Rotary Club, said that Ruth Coltrane Cannon has often been referred to as the inspiration of Charles A. Cannon, but she has also become an inspiration to our entire community and state. And so she had, and so she continues to be. Ms. Ruth attended Greensboro Female College, now Coeducational Greensboro College, and distinguished herself in every aspect of the life of the school, from activities and athletics to scholarship, graduating magna cum laude with a major in history. She had heard the stories of battles and heroic cavalry charges, and learned the lessons of courage and sacrifice at the feet of her soldier father, and she never forgot them. From her mother, she learned about her French Huguenot ancestors who fled Europe and came to Charleston to avoid religious persecution. Her maternal grandfather was Revolutionary Colonel Beverly Winslow of Virginia, She also heard stories of her Scottish and Irish ancestors who came to make their homes in the North Carolina Piedmont. Much of her future life was spent in honoring the memory of those who went before her and preserving their works. At home in Concord, Ruth Coltrane was being zealously wooed by a dapper young Charles A. Cannon, youngest son of J.W. Cannon and Mariella Boss Cannon. Charles pursued her with the same determination he would later demonstrate in the congressional battle over 2-price cotton. Charles Cannon finally persuaded his family that he wanted to devote the remainder of his life to the textile industry and to Ruth Coltrane, of course. He won their approval on both counts and first demonstrated his legendary marketing ability in 1912 when he secured Miss Ruth's favorable answer to the crucial question. Their traditional June wedding was symbolic of their future life together, both simple and elegant. The beautiful bride wore a gorgeous white satin gown, her only jewelry the diamond pendant the bridegroom had given her. Her love for simple beauty and for flowers was shown in the all-white interior of the D.B. Coltrane home, accented by white wisteria and lilies, soft lighting, and wedding bells. After the honeymoon, a young Charles Cannon devoted himself to learning the textile industry literally from the ground up, while Miss Ruth managed a home and a rapidly growing family. 4 children were born to the couple: William Coltrane, Miriam, Mary Ruth, and Charles A. Jr. Later, they built this beautifully furnished home on North Union Street in Concord, which Miss Ruth later named Jasmine. The home and its beautiful backyard gardens became a showplace for the city. Many members of the arts and letters community of North Carolina attended teas and meetings here that would determine the future course of organizations and causes in which Miss Ruth was deeply interested. Only 3 years after her wedding, Ruth Cannon lost one of the great influences on her life when her mother, Miriam Winslow Coltrane, died in June 1915. From her mother, Miss Ruth had learned much of what she knew of style and the social graces. I always thought it seemed altogether appropriate that her mother's death certificate describes her occupation as lady, with a capital L. Upon her marriage, Ruth Cannon transferred her church membership to nearby First Presbyterian Church, which her husband and his family had always attended. After her mother's death, she and Mr. Cannon donated an organ to Central Methodist Church in loving memory of Miriam Coltrane. She gave herself to civic endeavors almost from the beginning of her marriage. In 1917, as the United States was preparing to enter World War I, interested local citizens petitioned to form a Red Cross chapter for the county. Ruth Cannon served as chair for that group during the crucial period of organization and the election of officers. In addition to its efforts connected directly to the war in Europe, the chapter was interested from its beginning in focusing on the health and nutritional needs of children in the local schools and in children's hospitals. Those organizational emphases continued for many years, even after the end of Ms. Ruth's term of leadership, and for her continued all her life. Her husband Charles also suffered a heartbreaking loss when his father, textile pioneer J.W. Cannon, died in 1921. James Cannon was famous for his ability to judge men, and his wife, Mariella Boss Cannon, also knew her sons. Their youngest son, Charles A. Cannon, was chosen to guide the empire of looms his father had created. Although the responsibility for guiding and protecting the family enterprise and the jobs of thousands of workers weighed heavily on the young man, he and Miss Ruth always found time to devote to their growing family. The home his wife had created was a welcome haven for the young industrialist, and remained throughout his life his preferred place to spend his scarce leisure time. Both of them loved beautiful objects and became collectors of fine porcelain. Paintings and antiques were carefully selected to decorate Jasmine. Ruth Cannon's love of flowers continued into her married life. She joined and supported various horticultural societies and organized the Concord Garden Club. Her love of history and pride of family also continued, and she joined the leading societies of her day. The local DAR chapter, with its emphasis on preservation of local heritage and landmarks. The Cabarrus Committee of the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America. Daughters of the American Colonists. The North Carolina Society of Descendants of the Pilgrims. The Daughters of 1812. Daughters of the Colonial Wars, and the Colonial Dames Club of Washington, D.C. By the 1930s, Mrs. Cannon had become recognized as an authority on local history in Cabarrus County. Together with Alex Patterson's beloved Aunt Janie Patterson Wagner, she helped locate the sites of local historic events and produced a decorative map of the area, pinpointing their locations. A thriving local cottage industry sprung up as local artists were employed to apply watercolors to the prized maps. Despite a natural modesty, Mrs. Cannon found herself in numerous positions of leadership. She served as president of one local UDC chapter and was honorary president of another, which was named for her father. For many years, she was in the forefront of the Memorial Day celebration in Concord, which included the placement of flowers around the Veterans Monument in front of the historic Cabarrus County Courthouse, music and historical programs. Always concerned that local children be taught about their heritage, Mrs. Cannon conceived an historical pageant in 1934 that presented the landmark moments from Cabarrus history for the benefit of local school children and for the community at large. She persuaded Mrs. W.D. Pemberton of Concord to write a script for the presentation, which included in its cast descendants of the very pioneers who were prominent in Cabarrus colonial and revolutionary history. The production was held here at Concord's High School and was praised by local and state officials, including Governor J.C.B. Eringhouse, who wired Miss Ruth to congratulate her for the effort to perpetuate the glorious past, which is a part of our inheritance. She shared the desire of her husband Charles for a modern hospital facility to serve their neighbors and employees. Her mother-in-law, Mrs. Mariella Bost Cannon, donated a tract of land. Charles Cannon secured the passage of the necessary legislation, and the fledgling Cabarrus Memorial Hospital came into being in 1937. They generously contributed to the work of the hospital during their lifetimes, and Charles Cannon provided needed leadership for its governing board. Mrs. Ruth Cannon assisted in the formation of the Women's Auxiliary of the hospital and compiled the hospital's auxiliary cookbook. Following their deaths, the Cannon Foundation continued to fund the growth of the facility until the Little Hospital of 1937 became a leader in meeting the health care needs of the region. Despite her many civic obligations and responsibilities at home, Miss Ruth remained an avid student all of her life, particularly about those things that had shaped the history of her beloved state. Along with many of the state's cultural leaders, she was a member of the North Carolina Literary and Historical Society. She was also a member of the Roanoke Island Historical Association, the organization that produced The Lost Colony, the popular, nationally known outdoor drama by Paul Green. Through these interests and her work in the North Carolina Garden Club, she was a natural choice to be a leader in the movement to preserve North Carolina historic places and homes, such as historic Trine Palace here in Newbern. During the 1930s, the Garden Club of North Carolina expanded its field of interest to include the state's architectural masterpieces. In 1938, the group worked with the State Department of Conservation and Development to sponsor a spring tour of what they call gardens, old homes, and places of rich historical interest. Encouraged by the great success of that first tour, the Garden Club appointed a restoration committee chaired by Ruth Cannon. The committee decided to publish a book on the historic antebellum homes and gardens of the state, choosing its subjects from locations all across the state. Mrs. Cannon threw herself into this labor, soliciting articles and obtaining photographs for some 100 homes. The book, which was published in December 1939 in a limited edition of 1,000, quickly became a collector's item. Governor Clyde R. Huey wrote the foreword. On December 31, 1939, local newspapers featured a large photograph of Miss Ruth presenting the first copy to Governor Huey. Its publication might be seen as marking the beginning of the modern preservation movement. The book's text was written by Professor Archibald Henderson, who stressed the plight of Trine Palace, its importance in colonial North Carolina history, and the need to rebuild the building and its gardens on the original site. At the annual meeting of the North Carolina Literary and Historical Association in December 1938, Miss Ruth presided over that portion of the meeting at which the association voted to create a society to preserve North Carolina antiquities, much as our sister state of Virginia had done. Mrs. Cannon was appointed head of a steering committee to form the new group. The following year, the foundation was successfully laid for what became known as the North Carolina Society for the Preservation of Antiquities. Ruth Cannon was the logical choice to lead the preservation effort as president and was given that opportunity. She declined the honor, however, due to the great commitment of her time to completing the book, as she called it. She did serve on the governing body of the group during its formative years, finally accepting the responsibility of leading the society in 1944. Her 12 years at the helms of the Antiquities Group were enormously productive and gave impetus and credibility to the preservation effort in North Carolina as perhaps no other person could have. During her presidency, the Society moved away from the ownership of historic properties toward grants and an innovative revolving loan fund approach which allowed the group to assist local groups with numerous preservation projects throughout the state. The Society offered grants and advice for properties including the House in the Horseshoe in Moore County, St. Thomas Church in Bath, and the Thomas Wolfe Memorial in Asheville. The Society was also deeply involved with the project to restore Trine Palace and to build the Elizabethan Garden at Manteo. Ms. Ruth raised money for both projects. Both SPA membership and enthusiasm grew. Her first 3-year term was so successful that the constitution of the group was amended to allow her to continue serving as president, which she did until her stroke in the mid-1950s finally slowed her participation. She gave up the presidency in 1956 to an outpouring of praise and thanks from across the state. Members of the Society unanimously and gratefully named her as honorary president for life. No single other person did more to successfully launch the modern preservation movement in North Carolina. During the late 1930s, she persuaded Charles Cannon that the time was right to make a showplace of Kannapolis, the town his father had built in northern Cabarrus and southern Rowan counties out of red clay, gullies, and old cotton farms. The Cannon family had contributed to every aspect of life in the thriving community, providing land and funds for churches, sponsoring a band and an extremely popular YMCA, complete with a theater and meeting rooms for civic clubs and new church groups. The unique town provided educational, sports, recreational, and business opportunities for its citizens, together with a busy downtown business area. Roads and underpasses were being built to speed traffic to the new growing areas of the community, including the large Jackson Park community. There was no overall plan of development, however, and the Cannons began to dream of a beautiful modern city organized around one architectural style. They had both enjoyed their visits to colonial Williamsburg, a pace setter in historic preservation efforts during the 1920s and 1930s. With what I suspect was some very strong encouragement from Miss Ruth, Mr. Cannon engaged an architectural firm in the late 1930s to draw plans for renovation of downtown Kannapolis using the Georgian style of architecture prevalent in colonial Williamsburg. Although slowed by the war, the movement to make Kannapolis the Williamsburg of the South resulted in its beautiful downtown business area. One of Mrs. Cannon's best-known preservation efforts in those pre-war years was the restoration of the old farmhouse that became widely known as For Pity's Sake, and the ancient gardens that surrounded it. A number of stories attempt to explain the origins of the home's name, most of them centering around the surprised reaction of either Mr. or Mrs. Cannon when first viewing the unrestored home near Kannapolis Lake. Built in about 1820 by Bolland Steyerwalt, the brother of well-known architect and cabinet maker Jacob Steyerwalt, the home was purchased by the Cannons in 1940. Although it was in a state of great disrepair, it boasted hand-carved mantels, double entrance doors, and graceful staircases. Mrs. Cannon spared no effort in painstakingly restoring the farmhouse to its original condition. She even purchased the doors, blinds, and wallpaper from a century-old home near Mount Pleasant to accurately restore the Steyerwalt home. Boards from historic Red Hill, the Pfeiffer home in which President George Washington spent a night on his southern tour in 1791, were used in the restoration effort. She and Mr. Cannon, both of whom were avid and knowledgeable collectors, then filled the home with period antiques, linens, and books. In 1942, despite wartime gas shortages, the Cannons opened For Pity's Sake to the public for what was termed an herb conclave. A great crowd gathered to view the completed herb garden and the drying house, complete with a floor of handmade brick. Experts presented a well-received talk on growing herbs in wartime. There were approximately 100 different herbs in the accurate replication of an 18th century herb garden. During the war, Mrs. Cannon sent large quantities of seeds from her gardens to England, where the lengthy conflict had produced critical shortages. She also had the honor in July 1944 of christening a steamship of the Liberty class, built by J.A. Jones Construction Company of Charlotte and named for mill founder James W. Cannon. Cannon officials from Kannapolis and from New York City were present for the occasion at the Brunswick, Georgia shipyards of the company. The newly launched SS James W. Cannon then steamed across the Atlantic and took part in the invasion of southern France in August and September 1944, earning battle stars for her naval armed guard crew. The ship was sold in 1947 and eventually scrapped in 1963. Although memorable Easter sunrise services for the community were held on the grounds of For Pity's Sake beginning in 1947, the observances actually had their origins in the efforts of Kannapolis lawyer J. Carlisle Rutledge and another member of Trinity Methodist, Miss Nellie Alexander, who was later Mrs. H.B. Biggers. In 1946, Mr. Rutledge called Mrs. Cannon and explained that he and Miss Alexander taught Sunday school classes at Trinity and wanted to have their young people experience an Easter sunrise service For Pity's Sake. Mrs. Cannon graciously allowed them to do so, with the understanding that her jonquils were not to be walked upon. Both teachers and their students were surprised when they arrived at the farm early on Easter morning to find Mr. and Mrs. Cannon already there, armed with ample supplies of coffee, donuts, and bananas. That first effort was a great success and no jonquils were stepped upon. The following year, Mrs. Cannon suggested that the YMCA sponsor a community-wide service at For Pity's Sake. The women's clubs of the local YMCA, under the leadership of Miss Bess Breedlove, who was then head of the women's department, and Miss Nellie Alexander, who was also the director of choral music at the area high schools, organized and sponsored the first of many increasingly popular services by the lake. We are fortunate to have the original program for that first community-wide service, thanks to the thoughtful generosity of Jim Ramsewer of Concord. The Easter morning services were well attended, with thousands in attendance there. Only once did rain prevent the outdoor services being held on the grounds, among Mrs. Ruth's beautiful gardens, with the lake as a background. The Cannon family was not spared the personal tragedy of war. Their son, Charles A. Cannon Jr., an Army pilot, was lost in combat and later officially declared dead. The grieving Cannons helped endow a hospital at Banner Elk in honor of Charles Jr. Mr. Cannon welcomed returning veterans with jobs in his mills and with 100 small prefabricated homes in which to start their families in a section of Kannapolis aptly named GI Town. Mrs. Cannon also immersed herself in another labor of love as chair of the War Records Committee for Cabarrus County. The group assembled information on all the Cabarrus men who served in all branches of the armed services during World War II, and then supplemented it with all available information on those who had served in all the wars of the past from the time of the American Revolution. The large, invaluable book was privately printed in 1947 in honor of Mr. D.B. Coltrane, Miss Ruth's father. After the old floral and herb gardens at For Pity's Sake were fully restored, Mrs. Cannon's fellow gardeners were anxious to visit them during the peak blooming season. In 1950, the News and Observer of Raleigh announced that Mrs. Cannon would open her gardens to garden club groups in May. They had been previously opened in April of that year, but visitors always enjoyed returning to For Pity's Sake since the gardens were designed to have a different look each month through November. Gardeners loved the look of the herb garden with its wide variety of plants, all appropriate to the time of the home's construction. The herb drying house was built of hand-hewn logs and replicated an old apothecary shop. Fortunately for both historians and gardeners, an article from the 1946 Charlotte News contains an inventory of the plantings around the home. In November 1950, Mrs. Cannon brought an important part of North Carolina's literary community to Kannapolis for a night. During Book Week, a capacity crowd attended a banquet held at the local YMCA to hear the plea of Mrs. Inglis Fletcher that we preserve our historic buildings and papers for future generations. Many in the audience were thrilled to meet Mrs. Fletcher, author of a series of historical fiction novels set in eastern North Carolina during the colonial period. Mrs. Cannon also secured the attendance of Legette Blythe of Charlotte, the author of Bold Galilean and other books, as well as Mrs. Marion Sims of Charlotte, a popular short story writer. During her presidency of the Antiquities Society, Mrs. Cannon established an annual award in 1948 she called the Cannon Cup in honor of her husband Charles, to be given to those making outstanding contributions to historical preservation. Following her death in 1965, the award was renamed for her, and the Ruth Coltrane Cannon Award is the state's most prestigious preservation honor, presented for outstanding achievement of statewide significance in the area of historic preservation. Her daughter, Miriam Cannon Hayes, also a great friend of preservation, later endowed the Cannon Award in memory of her beloved parents. Ms. Ruth's interests were by no means limited to the written word. She had a lifelong love for the visual arts and for music. She was a director of the North Carolina State Arts Society, which successfully lobbied the state legislature for a large appropriation to serve as seed money for the first state-sponsored art museum in the nation. That art society had been kept alive during the Great Depression, largely because of the gifts and bequests from Robert F. Pfeiffer, who was also reared on North Union Street in Concord, not far from the childhood home of Miss Ruth. Music was always important to her, and she wanted children to have access to a quality musical education. She was an important part of the creation of the music department for the Kannapolis City Schools. After her death, the new music building at A.L. Brown High School was dedicated to her memory in 1969. Superintendent W.J. Bullock praised Mrs. Cannon's devotion to music appreciation, to her sponsorship of musical pageants for the high schools, and her support for the founding of the Kannapolis Concert Association. That same year, the Cannon Music Camp was established in her memory at Appalachian State University in Boone. She and Mr. Cannon had financially supported many colleges in the state, particularly the work at Appalachian State, at Wingate, and at Lees-McRae College, among others. A scholarship program funded by the Cannons provided scholarships for students graduating from A.L. Brown High School in Kannapolis, a program that enables many of my classmates to attend college. Although her activities were limited by the lingering effects of the stroke she had suffered, and she needed the assistance of a secretary to carry on her correspondence, I'm sure Miss Ruth celebrated with her friends across the state when the Tryon Palace reconstruction was completed and the building and gardens finally opened to the public in 1959. Mrs. Cannon had steadfastly supported, financially and otherwise, the work of the Tryon Palace Commission, on which she had served for 20 years. As we celebrate the life and accomplishments of this great lady, we are reminded that we do not know where the ripples will stop when we cast a stone into the pool of time. Thus, it is not a complete surprise that the present Tryon Palace Commission Chair is Cabarrus County's William C. Bill Cannon Jr., the grandson of Miss Ruth, and that he is himself a dedicated student of North Carolina heritage and history. Prior to his appointment as Commission Chair, Mr. Cannon served as Commission Secretary and as Vice Chairman. Bill Cannon and his wife Ann co-chaired the successful effort to raise funds for the North Carolina History Center, part of the Trine Palace complex of buildings. Despite projected state budget cuts, William Cannon faces the future of the revered landmark with the same cheerful optimism his grandmother would have exhibited. She must smile when she hears him say that despite budgetary constraints, Trine Palace will, somehow, survive for generations to come. In 1974, the Society for the Preservation of Antiquities was rechartered as Historic Preservation Society of North Carolina, now simply Preservation North Carolina. In accordance with Mrs. Cannon's vision for the organization, it maintains a revolving fund to assist throughout the state with the restoration of structures of historical importance. Seems altogether fitting that David Brooks' fine history of the Society bears the photograph of Miss Ruth on its dust jacket. Her natural grace and charm did not prevent her from being an effective, sometimes firm, administrator. It was said that when she wanted to see a project completed, her white glove concealed an iron fist. Usually, however, diplomacy won the day for Miss Ruth. Invitation to her teas here at Jasmine and Concord, to the Summit, the Cannon residence in Blowing Rock, and to For Pity's Sake in Kannapolis were avidly sought. Newspapers of that day reported on the meetings held in Blowing Rock, calling them the highlights of the social year. A great deal of work was also done at those events, however, and a formal business meeting was normally also scheduled. At one of those teas here in Concord, for example, the plans for a new outdoor drama by Dr. Kermit Hunter to be entitled Horn in the West and to be produced in Boone were completed around Mrs. Cannon's table at Jasmine, together with plans for the adjoining Daniel Boone Native Gardens. Horn in the West opened in 1952, with Miss Ruth in attendance, as she usually was on opening nights thereafter. Miss Ruth's range of interest was as boundless as the range of needs she saw around her. She was sensitive to the needs of women and children in a changing society. When the new Cannon Memorial YMCA in Kannapolis was completed in 1940, Mrs. Cannon's efforts ensured that they contained a modern women's department with its own separate entrance. She was an important part of the planning for the department, even choosing appropriate furnishings and equipment. She and Mr. Cannon also contributed to the children's home operated by the Church of God in Cabarrus County, as well as contributing to the grandfather home for children in Banner Elk. A dormitory at Wingate was named in her honor. Appalachian State University also named a dormitory in honor of Mr. and Mrs. Cannon, recognizing their many contributions and assistance to the school. After their deaths, granddaughter Miriam Cannon Hayes, who inherited her mother's generous spirit, ability, and love for music and the arts, continued to support many of the same worthy causes, enabling Appalachian State to continue its summer music camp. The music school is today officially named the Miriam Cannon Hayes School of Music. Late in Miriam Hayes' rich and productive life, she led an effort to complete Performing Arts Center for the Blowing Rock community, a facility known as the Miriam and Robert Hayes Performing Arts Center. Ms. Ruth's administrative skills are legendary. In an era when women were just beginning to show their abilities at the head of various enterprises, she was a trailblazer. In 1948, she became the first female president of the Roanoke Island Historical Association, involved in the promotion of the Lost Colony outdoor drama at Manteo. While visiting at Manteo in 1950, along with the well-known author Inglis Fletcher and Sir Evelyn Wrench, head of the English-speaking Union, the trio developed the notion of cultivating a period garden adjoining the Waterside Theater on Roanoke Island as a memorial to those first English colonists. The idea was presented and approved at the annual meeting of the Garden Club of North Carolina in May 1951. As head of the Roanoke Island Historical Association, Ms. Cannon was an untiring cheerleader for the project, locating a 16th century oil portrait of Queen Elizabeth I in a New York gallery, and helping to raise funds for what became internationally known gardens. Ms. Ruth generously opened the gardens at For Pity's Sake to the public in 1953 and again in 1958, with all proceeds of the tours going to fund the work on the Elizabethan gardens. The one-day tour in 1953 featured Adelaide Stevenson's sister in the role of Queen Elizabeth I, and drew a crowd of some 2,500 flower lovers from 9 other states, with one couple coming from Hampton, England. In addition to the opportunity to admire the gardens and the priceless antiques with which For Pity's Sake was furnished, a genuine Elizabethan dance was staged on the grounds by a group of appropriately costumed young men and women under the direction of an authority on the dances of the period. Following the well-publicized 1953 tour, For Pity's Sake became nationally known. In 1955, the February issue of a national magazine, Living for Young Homemakers, devoted 8 pages to the restored farmhouse and its gorgeous gardens, particularly the herb garden with its sheltering oak tree said to be 500 years old or more. In 1958, local garden enthusiasts were treated to a 2-day tour of the gardens at For Pity's Sake, sponsored by the Garden Clubs of North Carolina, for the purpose of assisting the completion of the work at the Elizabethan Gardens, particularly the completion of the Hayes Barton House. In its Sunday magazine describing the event, the Daily Independent spotlighted Mrs. Cannon, appropriately calling her our First Lady. Ms. Ruth also found time during her busy life to serve as the chair of the Garden Committee for Tryon Palace and the chair of the Life Membership Committee of the North Carolina Garden Club. It's little wonder that the Garden Club honored her as their leading gardener, presenting her with the Edna Maslin Silver Bowl and praising her as being everything a real gardener should be. For many years, the group said, she has been an unselfish and untiring leader, never seeking office or glory. Her leadership is responsible for a widening of gardening interest throughout the state and has caused a magnificent awakening of the potentials of making old homes and gardens live again. No one who knew her could have disagreed with their appraisal. Another well-deserved honor came her way in the spring of 1964, when Catawba College awarded her an honorary Doctor of Letters, recognizing her many activities and continuing influence in the cultural, educational, and religious life, not only of the Cabarrus County area, but of the entire state. Later that year, the Kannapolis Rotary Club, of which Mr. Cannon was a longtime member, honored him upon his birthday with a cake. Mrs. Cannon, who was present for the tribute to her husband, was appropriately honored with a large bouquet of 52 roses, one for each member of the Rotary Club and one for each year the Cannons had been married. Even as I read the club's glowing tribute to the contributions of Mr. Cannon to the community, I couldn't help but be aware that in many, if not most of those things, Miss Ruth was an active and encouraging full partner. Many were the tributes upon her tragic death in 1965. When informed of her passing, Governor Dan Moore said, "On behalf of the people of North Carolina, I regret the death of Mrs. Cannon, who has meant so much to this state, particularly in its cultural development. North Carolina has lost a valuable citizen and a lovely and charming lady." Local North Carolina State Representative Dwight Quinn noted that Miss Cannon's death in late December gave insight into the true meaning of Christmas. Her life was spent, he said, for the betterment of mankind through her untiring efforts for educational, health, cultural, and historical programs in our state and nation. With the death of Mrs. Cannon, the life was also taken from For Pity's Sake and its gardens. Everything of value was removed from the house. Some of the broad flooring was removed for use in the Cannon Visitor Center. The home itself was destroyed in November 1975 as part of a training exercise conducted by the Kannapolis Volunteer Fire Department. Of the fates of the heirloom flowers, herbs, and bushes, nothing has been written, and they are now forgotten. Perhaps none of the tributes to Mrs. Cannon was more heartfelt than that of Mrs. Guy M. Beaver, who wrote of Miss Ruth as one who loved and admired her. Mrs. Beaver ended her written tribute with a few lines from a beautiful poem by Margaret Sangster. "Somewhere back of the sunset, where loveliness never dies, she dwells in a land of glory with dreams in her lifted eyes. And laughter lives all about her, and music sways on the air. She is far from all thought of sadness, of passion and doubt and care. The flowers of vanished April, the lost gild of summer's mirth, are wrapped like a cloak about her, who hurried too soon from this earth." There is much that is magical in old Cabarrus County. If you walk the sidewalks of Kannapolis today, amid the architecture largely born of her inspiration, or stroll beneath the oaks and elms of North Union Street in Concord in the early evening, it is not hard to remember the gardens of those vanished Aprils when this departed princess walked among us. Even the gentle breezes in her garden at Jasmine seem to carry on the faint scent of faded roses and forgotten flowers. It is truly said that we've erected no suitable monument to her. Although her accomplishments affected this state from the distant mountains to the eastern seashore. Perhaps there can be no greater monument, however, than the contributions she made, the lives she touched while she was here, and the generations yet unborn who will owe a debt to her memory. Thank you for joining us as we have turned another yellowed page in the history of this special place, this Cabarrus. We hope to see you again real soon.